Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Power isn't always taken. It often slips quietly into the hands of the one who doesn't want it. Throughout history, the most magnetic figures weren't the ones shouting orders or demanding obedience. They were the ones who stood still, while everyone else scrambled. Psychologists even note that in group dynamics, people instinctively gravitate toward whoever shows the least desperation for control. That strange twist of human nature is exactly why Sigma females, without trying, end up becoming the gravitational center of any space they enter. They're not competing for the spotlight, they're making the spotlight nervous about shining in the wrong direction. While others are busy giving motivational speeches and drawing leadership charts, she's the one sitting back quietly, yet somehow everyone keeps adjusting themselves to her pace. It's not ambition, it's not strategy, and it's definitely not an accident. It's something far more unsettling. The natural authority of a woman who doesn't care to lead, but ends up leading everyone anyway. Number one, they lead because they don't need the ending. They lead because they don't need the ending. That's the paradox of Sigma females. While everyone else is obsessed with the finish line, they're the ones walking the path without a stopwatch in hand. Most people take on leadership roles because they want to win, a promotion, recognition, status, or validation. Their leadership is fueled by outcome obsession. But a Sigma female doesn't move that way. She isn't leading to arrive at some grand result. She moves because it's simply who she is, and that authenticity makes people follow without her ever raising her hand for the role. When someone isn't attached to an ending, they don't panic when things don't go according to plan. They don't crumble when a strategy backfires or when the group feels lost. The Sigma female can pivot effortlessly because her sense of value isn't tied to success as the world defines it. That calm, detached resilience is what others cling to, often without even realizing it. Suddenly, her voice becomes the one people trust, not because she has the loudest plan, but because she isn't blinded by the fear of losing. There's also an unsettling kind of freedom in the way she operates. She can walk away from power just as easily as she steps into it. That makes her leadership almost untouchable. Others might compromise their principles to hold on to authority, but she doesn't need to. She has nothing to lose, and that scares people more than an iron fist ever could. It's why her influence feels both steady and dangerous. She can't be manipulated with rewards or threats because she was never chasing either in the first place. The absence of that desperate hunger is exactly what makes people trust her more than anyone else. They know she's not playing for herself, which ironically makes her the safest person to follow. Without trying, she becomes the anchor everyone needs, not because she promised them victory, but because she's the only one who can move without being chained to the idea of winning. And in a world addicted to results, that kind of detachment is exactly what makes her the leader everyone ends up turning to. Number two, they attract loyalty by apathy. They attract loyalty by apathy. That's the strange and unsettling truth about Sigma females. People don't follow them because they're begged, bribed, or pressured into it. They follow because they want to. And the reason for that is simple. She doesn't care if they do. She isn't recruiting, she isn't campaigning, and she definitely isn't dangling rewards for compliance. Her detachment from the very idea of followers flips the script completely. It creates an atmosphere where the people who stick around are there out of choice, not obligation, and that choice makes their loyalty unshakable. When someone isn't chasing your loyalty feels real. It's the same reason people value friendships with those who don't constantly demand reassurance. You know you're there because you want to be, not because you're being emotionally blackmailed into staying. A Sigma female operates from that exact dynamic. Her apathy cuts away the pretenders and opportunists, leaving only those who genuinely align with her presence. And ironically, that core of self-selected followers ends up being more solid, more reliable, and more devoted than any army built on authority or charm. It also means her influence isn't fragile. Traditional leaders have to constantly maintain their grip through speeches, motivation, rules, or fear, because the people under them aren't there out of pure will. But a Sigma female doesn't have that burden. The people who remain around her have already made an internal choice, And that kind of loyalty can't be shaken by external pressures. They don't need orders to stand with her. They stand because they believe in her essence. What makes it even more intriguing is the irony. Her apathy is exactly what inspires devotion. People are magnetized by someone who doesn't need them, because that lack of need makes her presence feel authentic and pure. She isn't performing leadership, she isn't faking connection, and she isn't clinging to anyone. And yet, she ends up with the strongest kind of loyalty. Loyalty that was never asked for, but freely given. That's why when she does lead, it feels unforced, natural, and unbreakable. The followers who remain aren't trapped. They're there because deep down, they wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Number 3. They lead through absence. They lead through absence, and that's where the true depth of a Sigma female's influence reveals itself. You only notice how much weight someone carried when they're no longer around to hold it. With her, the silence she leaves behind is louder than any speech she could give. While she's present, people often mistake her calm for detachment, her independence for disinterest. But the second she steps away, the structure wobbles. Conversations lose direction, tensions rise unchecked, and the group quietly realizes she was the stabilizer no one thought they needed. This kind of leadership is unsettling because it isn't obvious until it's gone. Traditional leaders signal their power with titles, orders, or charisma, so everyone knows they're in charge. A Sigma female doesn't do any of that. She doesn't brand herself as the leader, doesn't demand recognition, and doesn't try to be the center. Instead, she naturally balances dynamics, diffuses egos, and keeps the energy from spiraling out of control, all without announcing it. People only see how much she held together when that invisible glue disappears. Her absence doesn't just highlight what she brought, it exposes how fragile the group is without her. The void makes people realize the calm they relied on wasn't coming from the loudest voice in the room, but from the one who didn't even seem to be trying. That discovery often reshapes the way they see her. She moves from the quiet one or the independent one to the unspoken anchor whose presence defined the rhythm of the space. And what makes it even more powerful is that she doesn't exploit this fact. She's not playing some manipulative game, leaving and returning to prove a point. Her absence is simply her exercising her freedom, the ability to walk away when she chooses. But that freedom makes her influence undeniable. When people realize they can't replace the stability she brought, their respect for her turns into something deeper. A recognition that leadership doesn't always come from the one standing in front. Sometimes it comes from the one who can leave at any moment and still be the strongest presence in the room. Number 4. They embody scarcity in a world of noise. They embody scarcity in a world of noise, and that's exactly why their presence feels priceless. In today's culture, everyone is shouting. People over-explain, overshare, and fight to be noticed in a crowded sea of voices. But a Sigma female doesn't join that race. She doesn't spill every thought, doesn't flood conversations with filler, and doesn't waste energy proving herself. Her words and presence are rationed with surgical precision. And that scarcity is what makes people lean in when she finally decides to speak. It's basic psychology. What's rare feels valuable. When someone talks endlessly, their words lose weight. But when a Sigma female chooses to speak, people pay attention because they know it's intentional. She doesn't talk just to fill silence. She talks to shift it. That kind of selectiveness creates an aura of importance around even her smallest statements, and it's not an act. It comes naturally from her refusal to perform for attention. Her scarcity isn't just about words, it's also about presence. She isn't at every gathering, she isn't visible in every moment, and she doesn't try to be everywhere at once. And that absence makes her presence magnetic. People notice when she walks into a space because it isn't a routine occurrence. Her time feels expensive even if she never says it is. In a way, she becomes like fine art in a world drowning in cheap prints, limited, deliberate, and therefore unforgettable. This scarcity also reshapes power dynamics. While others exhaust themselves competing for attention, she conserves her energy. And that conservation makes her influence more sustainable. Instead of being another voice in the crowd, she becomes the quiet center people naturally orbit. Her presence doesn't get diluted, and her silence never feels weak. It feels intentional. And here's the irony. She doesn't engineer this scarcity as a tactic. She isn't trying to be mysterious. She just refuses to devalue herself by overspending her energy. That refusal is what makes her rare in a noisy world, and people instinctively value what they can't easily have. By saying less, showing up less, and needing less, she ends up becoming more. Number 5. They don't demand respect, they trigger it. They don't demand respect, they trigger it. A Sigma female doesn't walk into a room making grand statements about her worth, her position, or why others should acknowledge her. She doesn't ask for validation, and she doesn't twist herself into someone else's mold just to be taken seriously. That refusal to beg for recognition is exactly what makes people give it to her anyway. The absence of need flips the psychology. When someone isn't looking for approval, others instinctively feel the urge to prove themselves worthy of her attention. Most people think respect comes from pushing for it, through dominance, through titles, through accomplishments on display. But those efforts usually reek of desperation. The Sigma female doesn't play that game. Her energy says, "I don't need your applause to know who I am." That kind of self-containment unsettles people, because it reminds them how fragile their own egos are. While others run on external validation, she doesn't even need to plug into that system. And because she doesn't chase it, respect starts chasing her. This is what separates passive authority from performed authority. Performed authority needs reinforcement. It demands attention to survive. Passive authority, the kind she embodies, thrives in silence. People defer to her not because she asked, but because her very being refuses to be ignored. It's the quiet confidence that makes people hold back before speaking nonsense around her, or check themselves before acting recklessly in her presence. They want to stay in her good graces, even though she never explicitly made that a condition. What makes it even more compelling is that her respect isn't negotiable. You can't bargain for it, you can't buy it, and you can't fake your way into it. You either earn it by showing substance, or you fall off her radar completely. That scarcity makes her respect feel like a prize, one people chase harder than the applause of 1,000 others. And in the end, that's the paradox. She becomes the most respected person in the room without ever once asking for it. The more she refuses to seek validation, the more validation seeks her. Number 6. They lead without language. They lead without language, and that's where their influence becomes almost unnerving. While most people rely on words to assert power, the Sigma female bends dynamics without opening her mouth. A simple pause in her response can deflate someone's ego faster than a lecture. A glance from her can stop a heated argument in its tracks. Even her decision to withdraw from a conversation can suddenly shift the energy of the entire room. It isn't mystical. It's the raw effect of someone who doesn't waste movements, words, or emotions. People are conditioned to expect leadership to be loud, speeches, directions, orders, and commands. But silence, when wielded by someone who doesn't need to prove themselves, is far more commanding. The Sigma female's silence isn't passive, it's charged. Everyone around her feels it, and they recalibrate without even knowing why. That's because silence from someone selective with energy feels intentional. It suggests control, it suggests clarity, and most of all, it suggests she sees more than she lets on. That alone makes people check themselves before they act foolishly. What makes this even more powerful is that her silence carries no desperation. She's not using it as a tactic to manipulate others. She simply doesn't speak unless there's something worth saying. That absence of performance turns her into a natural barometer in group settings. People watch her reactions more closely than they listen to the ones talking the loudest. She becomes the quiet reference point, the one whose non-verbal cues guide the room, even when she hasn't claimed authority. And here's the irony. While others spend energy trying to convince or persuade, she influences without effort. The people who notice her silence begin filling in the blanks themselves. They wonder what she's thinking. They adjust their words to avoid her disapproval, and they interpret her stillness as judgment, even if it isn't. That internal scrambling makes her presence stronger than the voices trying to dominate the space. She doesn't need to lecture, she doesn't need to argue, and she doesn't need to prove. With nothing but silence, she destabilizes egos, reshapes dynamics, and commands respect. That's the kind of leadership that can't be rehearsed. It's organic and it's untouchable. Number 7. They redefine winning without competing. They redefine winning without competing, and that's one of the most disarming aspects of a Sigma female's presence. While others exhaust themselves chasing titles, recognition, and the symbolic trophies of success, she steps completely out of that framework. She doesn't enter the race, she doesn't crave the applause, and she doesn't even acknowledge the scoreboard everyone else is obsessed with. Strangely, her refusal to compete makes the entire contest look childish, and the prize itself look cheap. When people see someone completely uninterested in the validation they're killing themselves to get, it forces them to question its value. If she doesn't care about the crown, maybe the crown isn't as valuable as they thought. That realization is unsettling. It destabilizes the hierarchy because it reveals the fragility of what everyone else is fighting for. And in that moment, her quiet refusal becomes the ultimate flex. It exposes the game as meaningless without her ever criticizing it out loud. What's more, she wins in ways the competitors can't even see. By not entering the race, she avoids the burnout, the compromises, and the constant need to outdo others. While they measure themselves against each other, she measures herself against nothing but her own internal standards. That autonomy is magnetic. People are drawn to her because she represents a freedom they secretly crave but can't access while stuck in the rat race. This doesn't mean she lacks ambition. It means her ambition doesn't feed on competition. She's not threatened by others succeeding, and she doesn't feel the need to constantly prove her superiority. That absence of rivalry makes her power cleaner, less tainted, and paradoxically more respected. Instead of stepping on others to elevate herself, she simply refuses to kneel at the altar of comparison. And in doing so, she becomes the person others look up to most, not because she outperformed them, but because she made their obsession look hollow. By walking away from the race, she wins a different kind of trophy, the kind people can't buy, earn, or be handed. It's the unshakable authority of someone who doesn't need external validation to prove their worth. That's the kind of victory no competitor can touch. Number 8. They hold emotional leverage without asking for it. They hold emotional leverage without asking for it. And that's where the Sigma female's influence becomes both magnetic and quietly intimidating. Unlike most people, she doesn't beg for attention, she doesn't plead for validation, and she doesn't shower others with approval just to keep them close. Instead, she moves with a self-possession that makes everyone around her acutely aware. Her reaction matters. A single gesture of acknowledgement can make someone feel like they've been seen on the deepest level. But her indifference? That can cut sharper than an insult. This is the paradox. She never sets out to control anyone's emotions, but people give her that power anyway. They instinctively measure their worth against how she responds to them. If she offers respect, it feels earned. If she withholds it, it gnaws at them. And she doesn't need to raise her voice, argue, or even criticize. Sometimes all it takes is silence or a lack of interest for someone to feel diminished. That's why people orbit her, because her emotional presence feels like a scarce resource they want to secure for themselves. It's not manipulation, though. Manipulators deliberately withhold affection to control others. The Sigma female simply doesn't need to give constant reassurance, and that detachment itself creates weight. Others sense she won't pretend to like you, won't fake support, and won't validate mediocrity just to keep peace. If she acknowledges you, it's real. If she doesn't, you know exactly where you stand. That clarity is brutal, but it's also addicting. People crave her approval because they know it can't be bought or forced. Her emotional leverage works in silence, in the smallest gestures, the pause before she responds, the glance that says more than a speech, the moment she chooses to disengage instead of arguing. Each of those carries more impact than endless words from someone else. People adjust their behavior, their tone, and sometimes even their ambitions around her, not because she demanded it, but because her indifference feels too heavy to risk. That's the kind of power that can't be claimed, only projected, and she doesn't even have to try. By existing on her own terms, she becomes the mirror everyone fears and desires at the same time. Number 9. They invert authority structures. They invert authority structures in a way that unsettles the traditional idea of leadership. Most leaders demand obedience. They create hierarchies where their strength depends on others being dependent. But a Sigma female doesn't work like that. She doesn't ask for submission, doesn't want followers clinging to her every move, and doesn't crave validation through control. Instead, her presence inspires people to become more self-reliant. Ironically, by making others less dependent, she becomes the one they credit most for their growth. This is a complete reversal of how authority usually functions. The alpha-style leader thrives when others need direction. The Sigma female thrives by making sure no one needs her. That quiet empowerment makes her leadership far more sustainable, because it doesn't crumble when she steps away. Instead of building a fragile pyramid with herself at the top, she creates something closer to a circle, each person growing stronger, yet all pointing back to her as the reason they shifted. What's fascinating is that she doesn't set out to do this. She isn't running workshops, writing rules, or handing out motivational slogans. Her independence becomes the unspoken blueprint others start copying. They see how she moves, without begging for approval, without chasing the spotlight, without bending for validation, and they start embodying that energy themselves. It's influence through example, not enforcement. And because no one was forced into it, the change sticks. The paradox is brutal. The freer she makes people, the more they acknowledge her as the one who sparked the transformation. They don't see her as a leader who kept them small. They see her as the rare person who made them bigger without even trying. That kind of influence doesn't just outlast titles and commands, it rewrites the very meaning of leadership. By inverting authority, she creates a strange but undeniable truth. The less she demands from people, the more they give back, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. And that gratitude cements her influence in a way no rulebook or speech ever could. Number 10. They're too consistent to ignore. They're too consistent to ignore. And that's what makes a Sigma female's influence stand apart. While everyone else is prone to overreacting, panicking, or collapsing under pressure, she remains steady. That kind of reliability is rare. And in a world where people constantly swing between extremes, the one who doesn't flinch becomes the quiet anchor everyone subconsciously looks to. It isn't that she tries to be a rock for others. It's simply that her emotions aren't on a roller coaster. And that stability is exactly what others crave when things get messy. Most so-called leaders shine when conditions are easy but falter the moment the situation turns volatile. They shout louder, scramble harder, and make impulsive moves just to appear in control. A Sigma female doesn't burn energy like that. She doesn't mistake panic for leadership. Her calm approach under stress makes her voice, when she finally speaks, carry far more weight than those who've been yelling since the start. People trust her, not because she demands it, but because she proves over and over that she won't lose herself when everything else falls apart. Consistency might not sound glamorous, but it's the foundation of trust. Anyone can inspire in a good moment. Very few can hold the same energy in a storm. She doesn't need dramatic displays to prove her resilience. She just remains the same, clear-eyed, unshaken, and unaffected by the chaos that consumes others. That's why people begin aligning with her naturally. She is the only stable constant in a sea of unpredictability. And here's the irony. Her consistency isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling herself. She's not trying to project strength for appearance's sake. She genuinely doesn't allow external noise to dictate her internal balance. That authenticity is what makes it so powerful. People realize they can lean on her presence without fearing it will crumble. In the end, her steadiness becomes impossible to ignore. In a world full of erratic leaders who confuse drama with direction, the Sigma female's quiet consistency doesn't just stand out, it dominates without trying. And once people experience that kind of reliability, they can't help but follow it. Number 11. They don't sell themselves, they sell reality. They don't sell themselves, they sell reality. And that's where the Sigma female's subtle power lies. Most people trying to lead are busy performing, a mix of charm, persuasion, and ego-driven storytelling designed to convince others that following them is the smart choice. They craft narratives that elevate themselves, tweak the truth to fit their image, and reward loyalty with attention or approval. She doesn't do any of that. She isn't interested in flattering egos, polishing appearances, or managing perceptions. She tells it like it is, bluntly and without apology. That honesty is magnetic. People quickly notice that she doesn't bend the story to make anyone, including herself, look better. She doesn't inflate her successes, downplay her failures, or manipulate emotions to gain compliance. The clarity she brings to situations cuts through the noise, the posturing, and the theatrics. Others, scrambling to maintain their illusions or spin their narratives, suddenly look small in comparison. Leadership naturally drifts toward her because people crave someone who can anchor them to truth instead of ego. Her approach also forces accountability, but in a way that doesn't feel like control. When she points out facts or exposes the reality of a situation, people align not out of fear or obligation, but out of necessity. They recognize that the path she highlights is the one grounded in clarity and logic, not ambition or self-interest. That credibility becomes a magnet for influence. Others begin to defer to her insight simply because she refuses to perform, manipulate, or play games. And here's the irony. By refusing to sell herself, she becomes indispensable. The more others attempt to pitch themselves or manage perception, the more obvious it becomes that she is the only one who isn't performing. That contrast is sharp, unavoidable, and compelling. People don't just notice her, they trust her. Leadership shifts to her effortlessly, not because she demanded it, but because reality, unvarnished and undeniable, always wins in the end. Her power lies in being a mirror of truth, in a world full of smoke and mirrors. She doesn't chase influence. It follows her because she refuses to compromise what is real. Number 12. They become the default reference point. They become the default reference point, and it happens almost without anyone noticing. In the middle of confusion, chaos, or indecision, people instinctively search for someone steady, someone whose presence can anchor the energy of the room. Without asking for it, without signaling that she wants to be the center, the Sigma female naturally becomes that anchor. Her composure acts like a silent compass, guiding the group not through orders or commands, but simply through the stability she radiates. Others might be debating loudly, panicking, or overanalyzing, but she doesn't join the noise. She observes, processes, and responds only when necessary. That stillness doesn't go unnoticed. It draws attention in a way that's subtle but undeniable. People unconsciously measure their own reactions against hers. They begin to mirror her calm, adjust their behavior to match her rhythm, and look to her as the natural barometer of what to do next. It's influence without effort, leadership without announcement. What makes this dynamic even more powerful is that she doesn't exploit it. She isn't manipulating people to depend on her. She's not creating followers or asserting authority. She simply exists with a level of internal balance and clarity that makes others align to her by default. And because no one is being coerced, the influence sticks. The group starts functioning around her presence rather than her directives, which makes her leadership feel organic and unstoppable. Her role as the default reference point also reinforces her autonomy. People notice, they respect, and they follow. But she remains untethered to their dependency. She can step back, shift focus, or disengage entirely, and the group will still operate around the momentum she subtly established. That's the genius of her unspoken power. She shapes outcomes not by controlling them directly, but by being the steady center everyone unconsciously gravitates toward. In a world obsessed with visible leadership and dramatic displays of authority, the Sigma female quietly becomes the axis everyone else orbits. She doesn't announce it, she doesn't perform it, yet her influence is absolute. In the end, the Sigma female teaches us a lesson few leaders ever truly grasp. Influence isn't about chasing attention, barking orders, or dominating the spotlight. It's about presence, authenticity, and the quiet power of self-possession. She doesn't seek validation, she doesn't compete for crowns, and she doesn't manipulate or demand loyalty. But somehow she becomes the compass everyone unconsciously follows. Her detachment is magnetic, her silence speaks volumes, and her refusal to bend to the chaos around her turns her into the anchor, the reference point, and the standard others measure themselves against. Her leadership isn't performative, it's lived. She leads by example, by consistency, and by the subtle leverage of her independence. People orbit her, respect her, and trust her, not because she demanded it, but because she existed on her own terms. She proves that true authority isn't taken, earned, or flaunted, it's felt. And in a world obsessed with noise, competition, and superficial hierarchies, the Sigma female's quiet mastery becomes impossible to ignore. To follow her isn't a choice, it's a natural gravitation towards someone who embodies clarity, balance, and undeniable presence. She teaches that the most profound influence comes not from forcing outcomes, but from being the person who others instinctively rely on, even when she isn't trying. In every room she enters or even leaves, the dynamics shift, and leadership flows to her naturally, effortlessly, and eternally. If you found yourself captivated by this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what part of the Sigma female's quiet power surprised you the most, and stay tuned for more insights that will change the way you see leadership and influence.